So we all know making a good game is hard and difficult. You know, it involves a lot of coding, art design, debugging, and testing. But in my opinion, what makes a good game is the creativity you put into it. You know, I don't care you're bad at coding, or your code has more bugs than a summer picnic, or your art style looks like it was made in MS Paint by someone who's never looked at good art. Look, my point is you need to have a good idea. How good your game is going to be strongly tied to that. Now, in this video, I'm going to see how well AI can make those ideas. Now, you still need to give the AI a prompt, so it's not 100% generated by AI. Not to mention that you need to set a whole lot of other stuff in the game engine as well. Now, making a game from scratch in ChatGPT is not really practical, but since I'm trying to figure out the AI's creativity, let's dive into it. Now, the first thing I asked it was to basically make a simple game in 3D, in which it replied a thorough setup on how to not just code the game, but also to set up the project. Now, a quick glance in the generated code, we can see that it is using the character body 3D node, which if you have no idea what it is, it's basically a class in the Godot game engine that allows for easier control of a character. So in this case, it was a good choice to use this class for a simple player. Also, we can see that it has made some variables for the speed of the player, jump strength, and gravity. But what I didn't expect to see was to think the method move and slide, which is a very common method while using this class, takes any arguments. This used to be the case on older versions of the engine, but I had specifically told it that I was indeed using the newer version of the engine. So being the reasonable person that I am, I let it know about the problem that we were facing, which in response it updated the code and everything was working fine. I'm assuming this happened because the AI was trained mostly on older versions of the game engine, but I don't think you'd have this problem on engines like Unity or Unreal. So then I started to feel like the game was kind of boring, so I told it to make an FPS camera and add it to the current script. Now, I didn't like the way that the camera felt, so I told it to handle the camera on input method instead. Also, please let me go towards where I'm looking, since that's how FPS games worked last time I checked. Now, it did give me the updated code, but some time had passed since the last prompt and it had forgotten about the version compatibility issue, so I had to tell it all over again. Now, I think if the AI saves something to the memory, then it can remember it for much longer. And so now we basically have a working player and camera controller on our hands made by AI. So now let's add something a bit more complicated to the game. Let's shoot a ball from the center of our screen towards the direction that we're looking. To achieve this, here's the prompt I'm giving it. Make the player shoot a ball towards the direction it's facing with a velocity in the same direction. The ball is a rigid body 3D scene. Now, if you don't know, scenes are like prefabs in Unity that you can instantiate. And in the code, we can see that it's checking for the input of the player, then it's calling a method. In that method, it's instantiating the ball and adding the velocity to it. Now, after making the ball as instructed, I saved it and dragged it on the player. Now, for some reason, the action for shooting and jumping was the same, so I let it know about the issues, and after fixing some more bugs, the code was ready. And so now that we have a defense mechanism, guess what else we need? More levels, different weapons, or maybe even different skins for the player, or actually maybe just an enemy character to fight. I actually let ChatGPT decide our next move. Now, before we go any further, I spent a lot of time on these videos to make them worth your time, and all I ask is help me reach 10k subs. That would be really cool. Hopefully we can grow this community together. Now, enough of that, back to the video. So now that our player can walk around and shoot, what else can we add to this game in order to make it interesting? And it basically just jumped towards stuff like ammo, reloading, enemy types, power-ups, which are pretty cool, but I feel like we should start with the enemy AI first. So I asked it to make an enemy AI that would follow and look at the player across the level, and then after fixing the compatibility issue, it was ready to be put to test. Now, while setting up the enemy's scene, I noticed that for the enemy's AI, we were trying to use the navigation agent node, which is basically pathfinding in Godot, but we also need to set up the navigation region in the main world first. Now, for this current level, pathfinding might seem overkill. And it really is, but if you think about it, we might want to add more obstacles to the level in the future. In that case, all we need to do is to rebake the navigation mesh and it should be basically ready to run. Now, after setting up everything like instructed, I was getting an error that the player node was not found, and I could technically just change the code in the editor. I decided to let ChatGPT export the variable instead. The reason for that is if now I want to add something to this code, it will give me the correct code with the fixes and changes. And here we go, we have an enemy that is following us wherever we go, and let's say if we add some obstacles, it should be able to navigate through them without any problem. Now, wouldn't it be cool if we had an HP system for the enemy, or maybe even a health bar? So just like before, I asked it to add an health system for the enemy with a health bar above it, and obviously subtract from the health bar whenever the ball from the player hits it. And that didn't work. Neither the ball was getting registered when it hit the enemy, nor the health bar was being displayed correctly. Now, the thing I wanted to fix first was the balls not getting registered whenever they came in contact with the enemy. So I let it know about the issue, in which case it gave me a script to add to the ball which checks if it has hit the enemy, in which case it will call the take damage method in the enemy. And you can see it is working absolutely fine here. However, the health bar needs more work, as it's using a progress bar which was meant for 2D games and not 3D. But after telling ChatGPT, I still had no luck. So then I started to basically make it myself, as I think it would have been basically faster. Now, before you click off the video and type in the comments that this is not a game made 100% by AI, I could use the AI solution here, which is this. It's basically a mesh for the health bar, but I didn't really like it. You could probably spend more time with it to make it feel better and look better, but honestly this is kind of the point where it's related to the art style of the game, thus why I'm doing it myself. Now, to add a 3D health bar, there is actually an add-on in the Godot asset library called Progress Bar 3D, which makes everything just much easier. Now, it works like a regular progress bar in 2D, but it's 3D. Here we go, we can shoot the enemy, and when it reaches 0, the enemy dies. But now that we can shoot the enemy, there's no way to actually lose in this game. So I asked ChatGPT to basically make it so that when the enemy comes in contact with the player, the game should end. So here I'm basically making the UI for the game over screen, and let's wait for the enemy to reach us, and there we go. Game over. Now, the last thing I wanted to add was a way for it to spawn new enemies whenever we eliminated an enemy. And it's basically telling me to create a new node and attach a new script to it. Now, the generated script had some issues. First issue was whenever the enemy's node was being instantiated, the player UI and the enemy spawner were not being assigned properly. Second issue was the enemies were getting spawned below the level, which is definitely not ideal. I fixed it by giving it a higher value on the y-axis while getting spawned. Also, I fixed the first problem by just typing the path of the player UI and enemy spawner directly in. Now all I had to do was to basically add a score counter, and with some tweaks the game was basically done. Now, final thoughts. Did it help me make a game? Yes. Was it purely generated by AI? No. I had to give it prompts, yes. But still, it was pretty impressive. Now, I still think the documentations of the engine that you're using is your best friend. But it did the job. I mean, we made a game. So, thanks for watching. Any feedback is welcome. Stay creative and see you soon.